I have not slept in 3 days. Not because of the pain, although my legs ache as if they are being twisted out of their joints, but because I am terrified to close my eyes. If I fall asleep now, I risk missing the moment when my wife finally sells my life to the highest bidder. I am 42 years old. Since the accident, I have been confined to a bed in the guest room on the first floor. For the last 2 months, my wife Sarah has been feeding me pills strictly on schedule, assuring me that the doctor prescribed them and that I need more sleep. Before, I took them without question. I swallowed whatever she gave me and fell into a dark, sticky pit for 12 hours. I was sincerely grateful to her and thought she was a saint for dealing with such a cripple. But 3 days ago, I stopped swallowing them. Now I just hide the capsules in my cheek, and when she leaves the room, I spit them into an empty soda can that I hide under the mattress. You know what happens when this stuff stops working? The world becomes sharp. The fog in your head clears. And you start noticing details that you missed while you were drooling into your pillow. You notice that your wife comes home late at night, but she smells not of the office and fatigue, but of a shower and expensive men's cologne. You notice that she hides her phone screen when she sits next to you. But the scariest part is that you start hearing what they talk about when they think you are out cold. This morning Gavin came to see us. He is our realtor. A slippery guy who always smiles with just his teeth. I lay facing the wall, breathing evilly and heavily, pretending to be in a deep medicated sleep. It is humiliating, but it is the only shield I have left. They did not even whisper. They spoke absolutely casually, like partners in a boring business. I heard Gavin tell her in a dry, businesslike voice that the appraisal of the house was ready and the market was hot right now. He said that if they listed the property on Thursday, they would close the deal by Monday. Sarah asked what to do about the signature and if the bank would require my personal presence. I heard her flipping through a magazine while she asked this question, as if they were discussing buying groceries, not selling our home. Gavin reassured her by reminding her about the power of attorney. Sarah argued that the power of attorney was only for medical decisions, and if the bank lawyers started digging, there would be problems. But Gavin interrupted her, saying he did not care because his acquaintance worked at the branch and would pass the papers without looking. He added that the main thing was to keep me in this condition for another week so that I physically could not call anywhere. And then they would check me into a state nursing home outside the city, where he claimed they look after difficult patients like me quite well. The nursing home. I know this place. It is not a sanitarium. It is a hospice for those who have no insurance and no relatives. It is the final station. Then they went to the kitchen to drink coffee. I heard the cups clinking. I opened my eyes and felt my heart beating in my throat. I had 5 minutes, no more. I did not start looking for hidden documents, I just reached for Sarah's nightstand where her work tablet lay. She changed the password a month ago citing corporate policy, but I have known my wife for 15 years. She does not like to complicate things. I entered our daughter's birth date in reverse order and the screen unlocked. I did not look at the messages, I did not care if they were sleeping together or not, the smell of cologne had already explained everything. I needed the numbers. I opened the banking app and that is when it hit me for real. It was not just that they wanted to sell the house. It was that all our accounts were at absolute zero. My pension fund was empty, the last transaction went through a week ago as a transfer to external details. My daughter's savings account was also zeroed out. The credit cards were maxed out to the limit. They are not just cheating on me. They are gutting me. Sarah is not just tired of a disabled husband, it was a cold calculation. She and Gavin drained all the liquid cash while I was in a fog from the pills. Now their final plan was to sell the house, take the cash, dump me in a poorhouse as an incompetent vegetable, and disappear, leaving me with millions in debt. Footsteps were heard in the hallway. I locked the tablet, threw it back on the nightstand, and closed my eyes, taking a deep, raspy breath to calm down. Sarah walked into the room and her voice sounded soft and caring. She asked if I was awake and said it was time to take my medicine because I needed rest. This fakeness almost made me sick. I opened one eye and saw her standing over me with a glass of water and 2 capsules in her palm. Beautiful, well-groomed, my wife. The woman who had just signed my death warrant. I croaked that my back was killing me and asked for 2 doses at once, trying to make my voice sound weak and pathetic. She smiled. She thought she had one. She thought I would swallow it and disappear into a narcotic sleep again. She did not know that in those 2 minutes I managed to forward the account statements to my backup email. My legs do not work and I am trapped in this house, but my brain is finally clear. And I have exactly 48 hours until Thursday to destroy their lives just as they tried to destroy mine. To help you understand the depth of the hole I found myself in, I need to rewind time a little and explain how I let myself be wrapped around their finger like a naive schoolboy. I never considered myself a stupid man. After all, I managed architectural projects worth millions of dollars and knew how to see risks where others saw opportunities. But as it turns out, when it comes to the woman you love, your critical mind just turns off and you voluntarily put on blinders so as not to notice the obvious. Before the accident, Sarah and I were that perfect picture that everyone hates on social media. I worked like a cursed man for 60 hours a week to provide the standard of living she was used to. I bought this huge house with 5 bedrooms even though there were only 2 of us and our daughter who had already left for college. I paid for her membership in an elite country club, her interior design courses which she quit after a month, and her endless shopping which she called therapy. I thought I was buying us a future in stability, but in reality, I was just paying for a subscription to her presence in my life. She always told me that I was her rock and that behind me she was like behind a stone wall. But now I understand that she needed the wall only to hide from the need to work and take responsibility. And then that accident happened. A drunk teenager in a pickup truck flew into the oncoming lane and turned my SUV into a pile of twisted metal. I do not remember the impact itself, I only remember waking up in intensive care covered in tubes and wires. For the first 2 weeks while I balanced on the edge of life and death, Sarah behaved impeccably, at least for the public. If you went to her Facebook page in those days, you would see a chronicle of a holy martyr. She posted photos holding my lifeless hand and wrote long emotional texts about the power of love and how she would never leave me. These posts collected thousands of likes and hundreds of enthusiastic comments about what a heroine she was. She fed on this attention like a vampire while I lay there howling in pain when the morphine wore off. But as soon as the doctors discharged me home and the harsh reality began, the facade of the perfect wife began to crack with frightening speed. At home there were no nurses and likes, but there were bedpans that needed to be emptied, bed linen that needed to be changed, and my moans that kept her awake. In the first week, she announced that she had fired the visiting nurse I had hired in advance. She argued that the services were too expensive and we needed to save money, assuring me that she could handle caring for her beloved husband perfectly well herself. I agreed because I felt guilty. I felt like a huge burden that had destroyed her beautiful life and was grateful that she stayed with me at all. That was when this slow and sticky nightmare began. Sarah stopped cooking proper food, complaining that she had no strength to stand at the stove after a whole day of running around with my medicines. She started feeding me reheated frozen food and cheap pizza, even though she knew perfectly well that my stomach, after massive doses of antibiotics and painkillers, could barely digest even broth. When I once timidly asked her to cook me some oatmeal, she threw the plate into the sink and screamed that I was an ungrateful animal who only demanded things while she was wasting her best years on me. In that moment, I felt fear for the first time. Not for my health, but because I was completely in the power of a person who quietly hated me. Then Gavin appeared in our house. At first, he came under the pretext of helping with insurance and tax documents. Sarah introduced him as an old acquaintance who specializes in complex cases with real estate and assets. He would walk into my room, tall, tanned, smelling of expensive perfume and energy, and next to him I felt like a piece of rotting meat. Gavin would pat me on the shoulder with fake sympathy, call me buddy, and tell me not to worry about the papers because he and Sarah would settle everything. They would sit for hours in the living room or kitchen, supposedly sorting out our bills. I lay in my room on the first floor and listened to their muffled laughter and the clinking of glasses. When I asked Sarah why discussing taxes required wine and dragged on until midnight, she rolled her eyes and turned on the gaslighting mode to full power. She said that I had gone crazy with jealousy and pain, that the pills had turned me into a paranoid person, and that I should be ashamed to suspect her and Gavin, the only people who were trying to save us from bankruptcy. She methodically destroyed my self-esteem day after day. She told me that I smelled of medicine and old age, that my scars made her nauseous, and that I was no longer the man she married. I started to believe her. I really felt pathetic and useless. I apologized to her for wasting her time on me. I thanked her when she handed me a glass of water with a sigh. I turned into an obedient dog that is afraid to bark once more so that the mistress does not get angry. And it was on this feeling of guilt and my medicated stupor that they played the main part. About a month ago, Sarah came to me with a stack of papers. She said that because of my disability, the bank could freeze our accounts if we did not reassign financial management. She spoke quickly and confidently, throwing around terms like restructuring and optimizing tax burden. Gavin stood nearby and nodded, confirming every word of hers with the air of an expert. I was under the influence of those strong drugs she was giving me and the letters were blurring before my eyes. I asked if I needed to read this more carefully, to which Sarah pursed her lips in offense and asked if I trusted her or considered her a thief. I looked into her eyes, those very eyes I had loved for 15 years, and signed everything she shoved at me. I gave her the passwords to the banking apps, access codes to investment portfolios, and signature rights. I thought I was saving the family from bureaucracy, but in reality, I dug my own grave with my own hands and handed her the shovel. After the papers were signed, her attitude changed completely. Even the appearance of care disappeared. She started coming home later and later, sometimes not spending the night at all, coming up with ridiculous excuses about a broken car at a friend's house or seminars that dragged on. Gavin stopped pretending to be polite and started looking at me like empty space, stepping over my wheelchair in the hallway. But I continued to swallow pills and convince myself that these were temporary difficulties, that she was just tired and soon everything would be fine. I was the perfect victim, pumped full of chemicals and self-blame, until 3 days ago I accidentally missed a dose of medicine and the veil fell from my eyes. Now, lying in the dark and recalling her every look and every humiliating word over the last few months, I understand that this was not a spontaneous betrayal. It was a cold-blooded, planned operation to dispose of waste material, which I had become. And the most hurtful part is that I myself gave them all the weapons against me. After I saw the empty accounts, the last drop of pity died inside me. Only cold calculation remained. I had less than 12 hours before people walked through that door to take my house. I lay in the dark, clutching my wife's tablet, realizing that physically I was a corpse. I could not stand up, I could not punch Gavin in the face, I could not even walk to the safe. My only weapon was Wi-Fi and the fact that I personally designed the security systems of this damned smart home. Gavin considered himself the master of the situation. He walked around my house, drank my whiskey, and slept with my wife. But he made one fatal mistake. He did not know that the exterior surveillance cameras I installed 6 months ago over the garage and on the back porch recorded not only video but also audio. And they saved it to the cloud, which Sarah had access to on her tablet, simply because she never checked it. I opened the security app. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to focus. I needed to find a moment when Gavin was real. Not the gallant suitor he played in front of Sarah, but the slippery type who cleaned out my accounts. I knew his habit. After dinner, when Sarah went to the shower, he always went out to the back porch to smoke his vape. He thought no one could hear him there. I rewound the timeline to yesterday evening, 9:15. A black and white image from the night vision camera. Gavin is standing by the railing, blowing steam. He takes out his phone. Dials a number. I turned the volume up to the maximum. The sensitive microphone picked up the ringing tone, and then his voice. Clear, angry, without a trace of fake politeness. He was talking to someone he called Mike. Judging by the tone, it was not a friend, but a creditor. Gavin was making excuses. He said the deal would go through tomorrow at noon and the money would go immediately in transit to an offshore account. And then he said the thing that became that silver bullet for me. He said that Sarah was a stupid chicken whom he was using as a human shield. He explained his scheme to the interlocutor: sell the house through a shell company called Orion, take the cash, close his debt to Mike, and tell Sarah that the bank froze the transaction. He planned to run off to Mexico as early as tomorrow evening, leaving Sarah with a ruined disabled husband, homeless, and with a criminal record for fraud, which he would pin on her as the owner. I saved this fragment. I listened to it 3 times. Every word was a nail in the coffin of their plans. This was proof not just of an affair, but of a criminal conspiracy in preparation for grand larceny. But most importantly, it was proof that Sarah was expendable material to him. Now I had dirt on them. But I needed to deliver it to the recipients so they could not wriggle out of it. I could not walk out into the living room with the tablet. I could not hope they would listen. I needed to put on a show. I remembered that a 65-inch panel hung in the living room, connected to the same home network. I went into the media server settings. I created a folder called Final. I uploaded the video from the porch there. I also added screenshots of empty accounts and documents I found online confirming that the Orion firm was registered to a figurehead connected to Gavin. I set up a forced screen mirroring from the tablet to the TV. I blocked the ability to control the TV with the remote using the administrator password that only I knew. Now the trap was set. I just had to wait. I wiped the fingerprints off the tablet, hid it under my pillow, and lay on my back. I stared at the ceiling and imagined Sarah's face when she heard her lover call her expendable meat. I did not feel bloating. I felt the cold satisfaction of a surgeon about to cut out a tumor. Tomorrow, when they sit at the table and take out their pens to sign my death, I will press one button. And this house will collapse on their heads. Thursday arrived with the inevitability of an execution at dawn. The morning began not with the smell of coffee, but with the nervous bustle of Sarah, who burst into my room before the alarm even had a chance to ring. She acted with the feverish energy of a man committing a crime and afraid of changing his mind at the last moment. She dragged me out of bed and began dressing me in a clean shirt and trousers that now hung on me like a sack due to weight loss. She pulled at my lifeless legs trying to squeeze them into the pant legs and all the while muttered incessantly that today was a very important day and I must look presentable in front of the people from the bank. I hung in her arms like a rag doll and tried not to moan from pain, although every sudden movement echoed in my damaged spine with a flash of fire. There was something deeply humiliating about letting the woman who plans to destroy you button your shirt and comb your hair. But I endured. I knew this was the last sacrifice I was making. When she transferred me to the wheelchair, I asked her to leave me the tablet. I told her I wanted to play solitaire to calm my nerves and not disturb the adults talking. She looked at me with relief, apparently glad that the vegetable would be busy and would not cause problems. She herself put the detonator that was supposed to blow up her life into my hands, and even adjusted the blanket on my knees, under which I hid the screen from prying eyes. At exactly noon, a black SUV pulled up to the house. Gavin walked into my house not as a guest, but as a rightful owner, loud, smelling of expensive tobacco and self-confidence. With him was another man, short, with shifty eyes and a shabby briefcase, who was introduced as Mr. Jenkins, an independent notary. I understood immediately that this independent specialist was bought completely, judging by how profusely he sweated and how diligently he avoided looking me in the eye. They rolled me out into the living room like the main exhibit at this fair of vanity and greed. They sat me at the head of the table, directly opposite the huge 65-inch plasma screen that hung on the wall like a black silent monolith. I sat with my head hanging to one side and deliberately unfocused my gaze, trying to look as pathetic and absent as possible. Sarah bustled around offering the guests water, while Gavin laid out documents on the table like he owned the place. I squinted and saw the heading of the top sheet, which stated it was a real estate purchase and sale agreement with a condition of immediate vacancy. They did not even try to hide their haste. They needed to close the deal today, get the money, and kick me out before sunset. Gavin began his speech. He spoke quickly and forcefully, addressing mainly the notary, explaining that I was in a serious condition after the accident and that the family had made a difficult but necessary decision to sell assets to pay for my expensive treatment. He lied so inspiringly that I almost admired his talent. Sarah stood nearby and nodded in time with his words, periodically dabbing dry eyes with a handkerchief. She played the role of a heartbroken wife forced to part with the family nest to save her beloved husband. What a cheap and dirty play it was. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The notary pushed a stack of papers toward me and held out an expensive fountain pen. Gavin loomed over me, his heavy hand landing on my shoulder as if pressing me to the ground. He said with fake softness in his voice to just sign where the checkmark is and then they could finally take care of me for real. Sarah took my limp hand and tried to put the pen in it. Her palm was moist and cold like a frog. She whispered in my ear to do this for us and for our future. I smelled that sickly sweet scent of her perfume, the same scent I smelled on her last night when she returned from her lover, and I almost threw up. I slowly raised my hand, but instead of taking the pen, I placed my palm on the tablet screen that lay on my knees under the blanket. Gavin frowned, not understanding what was happening. Sarah froze, her smile beginning to slide off, giving way to bewilderment. Silence hung in the room, dense and heavy as a grave slab. No one breathed. I did not say anything. Words were not needed. I just pressed the screen broadcast icon. The AirPlay system, which I had set up with my own hands, worked flawlessly. The huge TV on the wall came to life. The black screen was replaced by a grainy image from the night vision camera. In the silence of the living room, Gavin's voice rang out, loud, clear, amplified by the powerful audio system. Everyone present saw him standing on our back porch, casually leaning on the railing and blowing clouds of steam. He was talking on the phone, and every word fell into the room like a stone. He told his interlocutor to calm down, assuring him that the deal would go smoothly and the sucker would sign everything needed because he was on drugs. I shifted my gaze to Sarah. She stood thunderstruck, staring at the screen where her lover continued his monologue. And Gavin on the video chuckled that same terrible chuckle and uttered the phrase for which I started all this. He said into the phone that Sarah could go to hell and that she was a stupid chicken who thought they would fly to Mexico together. He explained his scheme, detailing how he would process the deal through the shell company Orion, how the money would go to an offshore account to pay his debt, and he would tell Sarah that the bank froze the tranche. He laughed on the recording, saying he would take off as soon as he got the transfer confirmation, and let her clean up the debt and mess with her disabled husband herself. In real life, Gavin turned so pale he looked like a corpse. His confidence evaporated instantly, giving way to the animal fear of a trapped rat. He looked at the screen where his own voice was signing his sentence and could not believe this was happening. The notary, Mr. Jenkins, jumped up from his chair so abruptly that he knocked over a glass of water. He mumbled that he had been misled and had nothing to do with this, after which he grabbed his briefcase and ran out of the house faster than an Olympic sprinter, not even saying goodbye. I switched the slide on the tablet. The next image appeared on the TV screen, a close-up of a bank statement. Red numbers, zeros in the accounts, and a long list of transactions to Gavin's shell companies. The next slide showed an official document stripping Gavin of his license for fraud and a list of lawsuits from deceived investors. Sarah finally tore her eyes away from the screen and looked at Gavin. In her eyes, I saw the horror of realization. Her whole world, built on lies and the hope of a beautiful life, collapsed in 1 minute. She understood that she was not just used, she was going to be sacrificed. She opened her mouth trying to say something, but only a pitiful wheeze escaped her throat. Gavin did not even look at her. He understood that the trap had slammed shut. He darted toward the door but stopped when I finally spoke. My voice was hoarse from long silence, but firm and calm. I told them, without looking at anyone in particular, that a copy of this video, as well as all financial documents with proof of embezzlement and fraud, had been automatically sent to my lawyer and the district attorney's office exactly 2 minutes ago. I added that the smart home system had locked the electronic locks on the front doors 5 minutes ago and they could only be opened from my tablet, so there was nowhere to run, and the police patrol, summoned by the automatic alarm algorithm, would be here in 3 minutes. This was the last straw for Gavin. The very alpha male who 5 minutes ago thought he was the master of life broke down. He did not defend Sarah, he did not apologize or ask for mercy. He simply turned to her with a face twisted in hatred and hissed that it was all her fault, that it was her idea to get rid of her husband and that she dragged him into this mess. He began to thrash around the room like a beast in a cage, pulling the handles of locked doors and windows, but the reinforced glass and steel bolts of the locks, which I designed myself for our security, now worked against him. Sarah stood in the middle of the room, alone and destroyed. She slowly turned to me. Black tears from mascara flowed down her cheeks. She took an uncertain step toward my chair, reaching out her hands, and began to babble something incoherent. She said Gavin forced her, that she was confused, that she just wanted things to be better for us, that she still loved me and we could fix everything. She begged me not to give her to the police, appealing to our 15 years of marriage and our daughter. I looked at her and felt an amazing emptiness. No anger, no pain, no love. Standing before me was not my wife, but a pathetic, frightened stranger who had lost her own dirty game. I pressed the button on the tablet, turning off the TV, and the screen went black again, just like our future. I quietly told her not to waste her strength on lies because I had heard every word she said over the last few months, every death wish and every insult. I told her that the subscriber she is trying to reach died that night when she called him ballast, and I am just a man protecting his home from parasites. Outside, the wail of sirens was heard. At first distant, then louder and louder, until the yard was flooded with the red and blue light of flashing beacons. Gavin huddled in the corner of the sofa, covering his face with his hands. Sarah fell to her knees beside my chair, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled it away in disgust. I unlocked the front door with one touch of the screen. Police officers burst into the house, performing their job clearly and professionally. I sat in my chair, motionless as a statue, and watched the handcuffs click on my wife's wrists. She screamed my name as she was let out, but I did not even turn my head. I looked out the window at the perfect lawn of our suburb and for the first time in a long time breathed deeply. The nightmare was over. I was broken, ruined, and alone, but I had won. 6 months have passed since that Thursday when the police took my wife away in handcuffs from our perfectly mowed lawn. Now I am sitting on the porch of my new house. It is much smaller than the previous one and is located in another state, away from the Chicago dampness and memories. Next to me lies Rex, an old German shepherd I took from a shelter a month ago. He also has problems with his hind legs and we are an excellent team of 2 lame vagabonds learning to live again. I put that huge smart home up for sale a week after Sarah's arrest. I could not be there. Every wall, every switch, and especially that 65-inch TV in the living room reminded me of how a loved one tried to dispose of me like a broken appliance. I sold it quickly, not even bargaining, just to get rid of this rotten shell of my past life. The money from the sale went to pay off the debts that Gavin and Sarah managed to rack up and to pay for my doctors. What remained I invested in this small cottage in the mountains and in my rehabilitation. The trial was short but dirty. My lawyer, the same friend I sent the files to, worked like a shark. The video from the porch and the financial documents left Gavin no chance. His lawyer tried to build a defense on the fact that it was just bravado and man talk, but the judge watched the video where Gavin discusses money laundering through a shell company and that decided everything. Gavin got 12 years in federal prison for fraud, grand larceny, and conspiracy to launder money. I heard he was sent to a maximum security prison and considering his debts to serious people on the outside, I am not sure he will come out of there alive, but that is no longer my problem. With Sarah, it was more complicated. She immediately made a deal with the investigation. She sold Gavin out completely, told about all his schemes, about other offshore accounts, and how he manipulated her. Her lawyer pressed on the fact that she was a victim of abuse and psychological pressure, that she acted under the influence of fear and infatuation. In the end, she got 3 years of probation and 500 hours of community service, plus full confiscation of property to pay off debts. She avoided a prison cell, but she ended up in another prison, the one she built herself. I know she now lives with her mother in a small apartment on the outskirts because all her property went under the hammer. From mutual acquaintances, I heard she works as a receptionist in a cheap motel because with a criminal record for fraud, no decent company will hire her, and she was expelled from the Designers Club in disgrace. Her glamorous life, her status, her high society friends, all evaporated the moment the handcuffs clicked on her wrists. My recovery was difficult. For the first few months, I howled in pain when physical therapists forced me to stand on my feet. Muscles, atrophied by months of lying down and poisoned by the chemicals my wife fed me, did not want to work. I fell, smashed my knees, cursed everything in the world, but got up again. Anger was my fuel. I wanted to walk, not to run marathons, but to never depend on anyone's mercy again. Now I walk with a cane. I limp and in damp weather my joints twist so much I want to climb the wall, but I walk myself. I drive the car myself, cook my own food, and walk the dog myself. And this simple freedom is worth more than all the millions I lost. A week ago, at 3 in the morning, my phone chimed. I unlocked the screen and saw a message from an unknown number. The text was long and confusing. Sarah wrote that she realized everything. She wrote that Gavin was a mistake, a delusion, that he brainwashed her. She recalled our trips to the lake, our happy years, our daughter's birthday. She wrote that she was lonely and scared, that her mother nagged her, that the job was terrible, and that she missed me. In the end, she asked if there was even one chance, even a tiny hope, that we could meet and just talk, because 15 years of marriage cannot simply be crossed out. I sat in the dark on my porch, listening to an owl hooting in the forest, and looked at these glowing letters. Before the accident, I probably would have been moved. I would have thought about forgiveness, about mercy. But that Ethan died in the guest bedroom, poisoned by betrayal and neuroleptics. I remembered her face when she kicked the shards of the broken glass. I remembered her voice on the recording when she discussed how to put me in a hospice. And I realized that I felt nothing. No anger, no desire for revenge, no pain. Inside me was a quiet scorched desert. I did not write her an angry rebuke. I did not write how much I hate her. I realized that the best revenge is not hatred, but absolute indifference. I just pressed the block button and deleted the message. It was the last thread connecting me to my past life, and I cut it without hesitation. I looked at Rex. The dog raised his head, looked at me with his intelligent brown eyes, and licked my hand. It was more honest than all the vows of eternal love I heard at the altar. I patted his withers and we went into the house. I have a lot of work ahead. I am opening a small architectural firm here in the mountains. I will design houses, but now I know the main rule of any construction: the foundation must be strong, and the security systems reliable. I survived. I am standing on my feet. And I will never let anyone decide my fate for me again. That is it. That is the whole story. If you like this story and want to listen to even more stories like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you do not miss new episodes. Remember, your support is very, very important for the channel to keep growing. And now let us be honest. Ethan's story causes shivers, but also leaves many questions. Write in the comments what you think. Did Ethan act fairly in the end? On one hand, he was protecting his life. They wanted to rob him, turn him into a vegetable, and throw him out to die in a state facility. This is pure self-defense. He used the same methods they did: cunning, technology, and cold calculation. But on the other hand, look at the situation through Sarah's eyes. Yes, she made a monstrous mistake. But she was under the influence of a manipulator. Gavin is a professional con artist. He knew how to press on her fears and ambitions. In the end, she was left with nothing, broken, with a criminal record, working in a motel. And Ethan, having evidence that could have simply stopped the deal, chose the path of total destruction. He did not give her a chance to explain herself before the trial. He cold-bloodedly watched her go to the bottom. Did he cross the line? Can betrayal be forgiven if the person sincerely repented and was deceived by another? Or is there a line after which in sickness and in health turns into an eye for an eye? And the most important question for you: if you found out that your partner plans to put you in a hospice for money, could you just block their number and move on, or would you go all the way to see them behind bars? I am waiting for your opinions in the comments. Let us discuss where justice ends and cruelty begins.